Okay, so this is again 2.1b that we're going through here. And again, this lesson is in particular talking about the cost of an apartment itself, as well as the upfront costs you will need. We talked about a few, but sometimes people don't realize that yes, for a house, you have to have a down payment, of course. You have to have money up front to buy a house. That's why they talk about it. It's my dog. Oh, saving for a house, right? But you actually have to save for an apartment as well because there are a lot of upfront costs. So that's the things we're going to be talking about in this lesson. So looking at example 1 here, because again, we already done the journal stuff together. Now we're here. So the square footage and monthly rental of 15 similar one-bedroom apartments yield the linear regression formula, blah, blah, blah. So I know this sounds confusing. I'll go back and I'll describe what's going on here. This is basically just talking about the relationship between the size of an apartment and the cost. That's literally what this means. Because X represents the square footage. So remember, that's how big a house or an apartment is. And Y represents the monthly rental price. So this equation here is the relationship between how big an apartment is and its price. Because obviously it makes sense. The bigger an apartment is, the more it's going to cost you. So this is just looking at 15, they just picked. This is like statistics. Yeah, they just picked 15 similar one-bedroom apartments and compared them based on their price and their size. So the cool thing about math here is that we can use this to predict the rent for an apartment with a certain size. Or we can do vice versa. We can look at a rent and figure out how big the apartment would be. So this is just, again, like a good estimation tool to help us figure out, okay, if I want an apartment this big, about how much is it going to be per month? So what we're going to do here is, this is basically our formula. We're going to plug into it, yeah? However, I'm going to copy it. 485x plus 840.51. Now, this is our formula we're going to plug into. However, guys, with this formula, here's what we tend to forget. We forget that there are 2 variables. There's an x and a y. We could possibly plug into either. Just because the x is over here and the y is by itself doesn't mean that we're never going to plug into y. So keep that in mind, because here's how we know. It says determine the monthly rent for an apartment with 1,200 square feet. So here's what I want you to do. You can tell me, please, 1,200 square feet, reread these 2 little phrases here. If I have 1,200 square feet, is that X or Y? Reread what I had highlighted. Is 1,200 square feet X or Y? This is X because X represents the square footage. So what this means is this is going to go in for X to solve for Y. So that's how you want to attack these questions, is you want to ask yourself, am I plugging in for X? Or am I plugging in for Y? If you make a note to yourself off to the side, you might want to do that. We are plugging in for X because X is square footage and this says square feet. So this one's actually pretty easy. Y equals 1.3485, parentheses, we know how to plug in, plus 840.51. So what this is going to find here is going to be the possible cost of this size apartment. So go ahead and plug that in the calculator. Do it myself as well. 1.3485 times 1,200 plus 840.51. Okay, so we should get 2,458.71. So this is the monthly rent for this apartment. That's very expensive. 1,200 square feet is like, I have a 3-bedroom house right now that's smaller than my house. And my house is a third of that cost. But again, it says similar 1-bedroom apartments. So it's possible these 15 apartments they're looking at are like in San Francisco or somewhere very expensive. Actually, possibly even Flagstaff. Flagstaff is really expensive. So depending on where you're looking at, we would have a different equation, right? These particular bedrooms we're looking at happen to be very expensive. So if you are somebody who wanted this big of a apartment, in a particular city, that might be the cost. It's just an estimation. Let's try it again here. Now it says determine the square footage of an apartment with a monthly rent. So here's what you want to focus on. What's the number you're given? We're still going to use this same equation. I'm going to go ahead and copy it one more time. We got y any time now. There we go. Y equals 1.3485x plus 840.50. 1. So here's our formula they've given us basically. So we want to go back up to the highlighted section. We are given, again, focus on the given, a monthly rent of $1,900. Go back and reread what I highlighted. Oops. Go back and reread what I highlighted here. Is monthly rent of $1,900. Is that X or Y? Reread the highlighted sentences. That's Y now, because Y is the monthly rent. Y represents the monthly rental price, monthly rent of $1,900. So don't get confused, guys. I am now given the monthly rent. It's like I'm going in reverse. So I know how much I can afford. So I gotta say to myself, well, okay, I'm looking in this city, and this equation represents the rising prices of these apartments. I know I can spend $1,900. How big of an apartment can I get? That's what this question is asking. Determine the square footage. So we're going to be able to figure out how big of an apartment you could get with $1,900. Now, it's been a while, but we need to solve this equation because over here, this was all good to go, right? No variables. And my variables will by itself. So we just plugged in the calculator. But here, this is what I'm trying to solve for. So I want you to try it first. It's been a while. I know these are big numbers, but guys, if this said 5 equals 2x plus 10, this is the exact same equation as this, just with different numbers. 5 equals 2x plus 10, number equals number x plus number. It's the same thing. So try and solve this equation. Don't get confused by the big numbers. We'll come back and check. Okay, guys, so we should know this. You should subtract the 840.51 first because we got to get the variable by itself. So we have to move everything away that is furthest from the variable. I can't touch this yet until I get rid of this. So 1,900 minus 840.51, we should get 1,059.49. And then over here, that's gone. I still have 1.3485x. Okay, so then to wrap this up, I need to get x by itself. This is multiplying going on here, right? This is 1.3485 times x. I want to undo that multiplication by dividing. 1.3485 x equals, I need to do this in the calculator. 1059.49 divided by 1.3485. Okay, so we get 785.68. Now, you're not going to get marked down for this because when you do your test and your homework, you don't use units anyways, but I want you guys to see the difference. We found the monthly rent here, which is why I put a dollar sign on this. So this question was, for this size apartment, this is how much it might cost you. This question is different. For this much money, this is how much square feet you can get. This is the size of the apartment, right? Determine the square footage. This is square feet. So again, what this tells you is, okay, I can afford $1,900 using this equation, comparing all these different apartments. That's how big of an apartment I could get. But again, you're not going to lose points for units because there's no units on the homework or the test. So I want you to try this one more time. So this is a new equation now. However, x still represents the square footage and y still represents the monthly rental price. You need to ask yourself for this question every single time, for this type of question. Am I plugging into x or y? Focus on what you are given. Ask yourself, is that x or is that y? And then solve it however you need to solve it depending on where it got plugged in. Go ahead and try it. Okay, so let's see. Oops, what did I do? There we go. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Monthly rent is $1,500. This is why. I don't know how to make that more clear, guys. I always have students that are a little bit confused. It tells me why is the monthly rent is $1,500. That's why. So not only do we need to be able to recognize, oh, that's why, I still have students who can tell me, yeah, that's why, because Y is the monthly rent, and then they plug it into X. No, it's going to go in right here, and we have to move stuff around and solve for X, right? So I'm going to copy this down. Y equals 1.21X plus 840.51. I'm plugging in for Y, so that's where the 1,500 goes. I'm going to subtract that 840 over because I can't touch the 1.21 yet. That's gone. Let's see. We got 1,500 minus 840.51. We get 659.49 equals, I got 1.21x left over. We're going to divide that 1.21 out. So this is, again, going to tell us how big of an apartment we can afford with that price. Okay, we got 545. Not a very big apartment, 545.03. If any of you guys have ever been in my room or Mr. Mayfield's room, because we're right next to each other, we board the Ram Shack. Again, this is square feet. My room at school is smaller than that, and that's about how big my first apartment was. It's not very big. It's a single bedroom, it's a living room and a kitchen and a bathroom. Yeah, that are pretty small. And again, it was smaller than my classroom actually. So again, guys, with these questions, ask yourself, plugging into X or plugging into Y? Depending on which you plug into, you might just have to plug straight in the calculator. You don't got to move anything around. Or we do have to move some stuff around to solve for the variable. So it depends. So don't think, oh, this one problem is done the exact same way every time. Either X or Y. If it's X, you just plug straight into the calculator, it's good to go. If it's Y, you have to move some stuff around. Okay, let's go on to the next topic here. So this topic now is talking about the upfront costs. That's what they say right here. So go ahead and read this. Abby and Dennis, with their dog Rory, these are actually friends of mine, are moving into an apartment that would cost $1,100 a month. And the office manager gave them a list of all the money they would need to pay upfront before moving in. So again, guys, this is what it means by upfront. You have to pay that money and then you get the apartment. Yes, even though you don't have like a down payment for an apartment, there are several things you have to give them up front. Don't just think if you don't have any money saved up, then you can move into an apartment. There are some fees, there's some deposits, and this concept of first and last month's rent that we talked about, hopefully we're understanding that. So let's go through this. All we have to do, what is the total they need to have up front? We're just gonna add them together. Add all together. Now it's easier said than done though, because we have to know, I know 50, I know 300. I have to know what this is and what this is. So I'm gonna go ahead, we got 50 plus 300 plus I need to find 15% of the monthly rent. I want you to try this. It tells you what the monthly rent is. We need 15% of that. Go ahead and try it, guys. Okay, we should be getting this by now. This is the monthly rent. So 15% of that should be 0.15 times 1,100. Again, guys, if you cannot do a simple percentage, 15% of 1,100, like that, you're behind. You're not staying on top of your lessons because you're not practicing this often enough. 0.15 happens to be 15 divided by 100. Of means to multiply, we have 1,100. So 0.15 times 1,100. Okay, so we should get 165 here. So this is the security deposit. So again, we talked about security deposit. That is the money you pay up front that you can get back once you move out of the apartment if you have left the apartment in good condition. If you trash the apartment, you don't get that money back. And then we need first and last month's rent. Now again, guys, what this basically amounts to is 2 months of rent. First and last, that's 2 months of rent. So let me finish typing this here. So we talked about what that means, but again, it's basically a safety measure that guarantees that when you move out of the apartment, even if that's a year or 10 years in the future, you don't have to pay your last month's rent because they already collected it so that they are guaranteed to get your last month's rent. Again, my tenants in my house, we did not collect last month's rent, and hey, guess what? They never paid it. They left. And now what can I do because they're gone? They're out of my house. So it amounts to the first month you live there and the last month, whatever that may be, it's just 2 months worth of rent. So 1,100 plus 1,100. This, once again, this is the security deposit. This is first and last. So let's add all this together. 50 plus 300 plus 165 plus 1,100 plus 1,100. Okay, we got 2,715. So as you can see, guys, if they want to move into this apartment, they have to have at least this much money saved up. Otherwise, they can't move in. So if you are wanting to move out into an apartment, you need to start saving money. You usually, in most places, cannot just move right in without paying anything up front. There are fees, there's some deposits, and very often you got first and last month's rent. So I want you to try it one more time. Now, the only difference between these two questions is it's not bulleted. So you have to skim through the question and you want to find everything they needed to pay up front. Be careful because there is one number that they don't have to pay up front. It's just saying, hey, the apartment is this much per month. They don't say they have to pay that up front. So take a moment and we'll check. All I want you to do is go through and underline, or you can write down all of the things they have to pay up front. I will tell you there is 1, 2, 3, 4 things they have to pay up front. So go ahead and try it. Okay, so we have a $100 application fee for the apartment of $900 per month. Now notice, it does not say in that sentence they owe that rent right away. So we're going to come back to that. But they do say $100 application deposit. They're required to provide a credit report that costs $50 and pay a security deposit equal to a half month's rent. So this is where we're going to use this information. This is 1 month's rent. This security deposit is half of that. The landlord also requires the last month's rent. So again, all that means is this is just 1 month of rent. Notice it does not say first and last. It depends on the place. You'll have to do your research if you are applying to an apartment. All of the apartments' fees are different. So I'm going to list this out. We have the $100 application deposit. We have the $50 credit. We have half of a month's rent. And we have last month's rent, which ends up just being 1 month. Don't get confused about last month. It just happens to be whatever your last month's rent is. So we already have the 100 and the 50, we need these two. So take a moment, see if you can figure it out what these two are, and if you haven't finished the problem yet, add everything together and get the answer. Okay, so a half of a month's rent, well, if 1 month is 900, I just need half of that. So that's $450. As well as a full last month's rent, so this is 900. So this is what I should have added together. This is half of a month's rent. This is just 1 month, 1 more month they're asking for. So 100 plus 50 plus 450 plus 900. So for this place, you only need $1,500 up front. So again, guys, with these questions, all you're doing is adding stuff together. You just have to be able to skim through and find all of the things that are being added together. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of calculations. Again, in this case, we had to find the percentage. In this case, we took half of that monthly rent. So sometimes things are not just going to be given to you. but it is just adding all these numbers together. Let me know if you read a problem though and you get confused. If you're missing a piece of information, I can help point out what you're missing.